Let's now take a look at the interface between British arrival and Indigenous Australia. That point where the British arrive in Australia. Remember, we're talking about who we are as a nation, we're telling the truth in our history as best we can, and we're not wanting it to be a mystery. Let's sort out those things that perhaps you should have known in earlier grades but might have forgotten or may never have sort of sunk in. This is a map of Cook's 3 voyages. Now, Captain Cook is operating in 1770. He is the person who maps the east coast of Australia and claims Australia for the British. Let's not confuse him with Captain Arthur Phillip, who arrives with the first fleet of convicts in 1788. So Cook, the Endeavour, mapping the east coast 1770. Captain Arthur Phillip, with the first fleet, who was on a ship actually called the Sirius, that arrives in Sydney Cove in 1788. Let's think about Cook. Who is this guy? Lieutenant James Cook was a 40-year-old navigator who led a combined Royal Navy and Royal Society scientific expedition. So the British Royal Navy and the British Royal Society. It was a scientific journey. The ship he came on was a converted coal ship, and it was called, the class of boat was a bark, His Majesty's Bark, the Endeavour. That was its title. Now, it's a small boat, 30 metres long, 32 metres long, 8.9 metres wide. Not a large ship at all. Now, we're really interested in his journey and who he brought with him in this case. On that 32-metre long ship, there were 73 sailors and 12 Marines, soldiers who were based on Royal Navy ships. There was an astronomer. There were 2 naturalists who studied fauna and birds and sea life and so on. There was a botanist. The famous botanist was Joseph Banks. There were 2 artists. There was a scientific secretary who wrote up all their notes, and there were 2 black servants. Now, the first of the 3 voyages is the one that's crucial to us. That journey of Cook's took 3 years, and it's the one marked in red. So let's have a look at it. They leave Britain. They come down the Atlantic near South America. They stopped at Rio de Janeiro. Then they trace the transit of Venus, that red line. They're following an astronomical event, and they are using the heavens, the stars, as navigation. He goes around New Zealand and then makes landfall in Port Hicks. Down here, Port Hicks is on the border, roughly, it's New South Wales, Victoria. They then make their way up the Australian coast, along the east coast, mapping largely the Queensland coastline, before making landfall at a place that becomes known as Possession Island. Then going through Torres Strait, they make their way to what was called Batavia in these days, in present-day Indonesia. Then they made their way across the Indian Ocean. They're going around the globe if you think about it. Across the Indian Ocean, sailing ship, a small sailing ship across vast, vast areas to southern Africa, and then up, and you can see over here again, back up to Britain via the Atlantic again. Now, this is an enormous journey. Their mission was a secret mission. It had 2 sections marked secret in envelopes. Neither mission authorised the taking of possession of what was referred to as the southern continent, an unknown southland, Terra Australis Incognita. It was to map the transit of Venus and to map the coastline of Australia. Now, he was not authorised to claim the Australian landmass, this great southern land. He wasn't authorised to claim that for Britain. And he doesn't do so, by the way. He does land at Possession Island. But when he gets to Batavia, up here in Indonesia, he goes back into his notes and his journals, and he claims that he actually did so. And he claims that he did it on Possession Island, and he claims that he did this on the basis of Australia being terra nullius, uninhabited, unimproved, claimed by no one, thus ignoring Indigenous ownership and possession of the land before him. Most of the time the British would purchase land, they would invade, fight, take treaties, make treaties and so on, but in Australia's case, actually claimed the land was uninhabited. He names this east coast of Australia that he claimed for Britain, New South Wales. The whole lot of it becomes known as New South Wales. The whole journey he was on is over 100,000 kilometres long. From an Australian point of view, he claims that there are good facilities for ports, especially around Botany Bay, suitable for settlement. He reports good soil in New South Wales, suitable for farming and growing crops. And he reports opportunities in the area, particularly around the area of Norfolk Island and so on. He reports this later on as places where shipbuilding materials are available, particularly on this later journey in green. But at the end of his journeys, which he does throughout the early 1700s, or 1770s, and creates these journals and all these reports to the British Admiralty, the British government, puts them in reports, and they lay untouched, unread, after initially being looked at for about a decade. It's not until Britain has a crisis over what to do with prison populations that a decision is made to send convicts on the First Fleet to Port Jackson in Australia, New South Wales, in 1788. So hopefully that's given you a little bit of an idea of who James Cook is and why does he matter to us.